Hi, good afternoon. Very warm welcome to you. Thank you for joining us once again. My name is Shona Smith. I'm a moderator together with Rebecca Place. And today in this session, we have Vasanti Ramdeen, who I'll hand over to now, who's going to talk to you about using technology to engage students in the classroom. Okay, Vasanti?
Okay, thank you, Shona. Good afternoon, everybody. As Shona mentioned, my name is Vasanti Ramdeen. I am the Deputy Head of Primary at the British Council School in Madrid. I'm also part of the digital strategy team at the school. And recently, following on from our use of Microsoft Office 365, I've now qualified as an MIE expert, innovative educator expert. So should you have any questions about Microsoft at any other point, of course, you can contact me. I have added my Twitter account as well, should you be interested. I don't really use it very much at the moment for posting things myself, but this is something that I will begin using in the future. Okay, just to talk you through a little bit about what I will be sharing with you today. As you can see, there's a list of different pieces of software, of apps that I'll be sharing with you, discussing ideas of how you can use them. And also just I'll be leaving some time at the end to talk a little bit about Microsoft Office 365, as I'm aware that quite a few teachers are now using this as a tool for online learning with their students. So I will leave some time at the end to help with some queries there or some examples of how you can use that. But just starting off thinking about the purpose, why would we be using technology with students in the classroom? Now, when we were children, and probably a lot of this still happens now with younger students in school, teachers often ask, you know, what do you want to be when you grow up? And for me, my answer was always that I wanted to be an author. And you can see there that this is a story that I wrote as a child. When I was in year 5, I was 10 years old, and I actually kept all of the stories that I wrote when I was a young child, because this is something that I was really passionate about, and I really did think that I would grow up and become an author. And part of the reason for that was that my teachers in school dedicated a lot of time into giving us a purpose for our writing. So as well as actually setting a task of writing something, we would then have opportunities to redraft it, write it up in neat, and create books. So I have lots and lots of books that I wrote as a child that I still have to this day, however many years later. So I think the idea of a purpose for the work that the students are doing is really important, and it's not only with technology but everything that we do, and I'm sure lots of you are aware of this already. But I think that's something that we can now think about. Okay, so instead of creating a book on paper, thinking about the students that we have in our classrooms today and where their futures lie and what they'll be doing in the future, we need to start thinking about how we can give them that purpose that will actually help them to benefit their possible future careers for jobs that we perhaps don't know exist. So therefore starting to give them the skill set as opposed to just the content knowledge itself. So today's session is about sharing some ideas of tools that you can use in the classroom with students, not only to engage them, but also giving them skills that they can then apply across a range of different subjects, areas, and even into their future years when they start their careers. So thinking on about, okay, so when I was a child, I was creating books in the classroom. We need to think about, okay, how can we use technology to do something similar so that the students feel like they have a purpose for the writing that they are creating. So something that we use a lot in my school is Comic Life, and we've used Book Creator as well. And with Comic Life, if you can see the picture at the bottom, what we usually do is we get the students to create a short storyboard on paper first. So we are still getting the opportunity for them to do their handwritten work. We're very conscious of the fact that, you know, we need to have a balance between technology and handwritten work as well. It can't all be on the computer. So they create their storyboard for a piece of writing. And then following on from that, their final draft, instead of rewriting that in neat, would be to create that piece of writing on, for example, Comic Life or Book Creator. So these are examples of using the app Comic Life, which is available on iPads. I chose this picture in particular because I just thought, you know, it is quite impressive what the children can do from a very simple app. And we do this task with children in year 3 or year 4, so they're about 7 or 8 years old. So it could be that they're using the app, for example, to create their own work. So it could be a story that they've written that they then turn it into a comic book, or they turn it into just using Book Creator, their own story online. They could use images that they've drawn and take photos of those images, or they could access images from the internet. It could be for younger students that maybe you provide a comic book perhaps with the images in the wrong order and they need to resequence them. Or perhaps higher up, if you're thinking about, for example, retelling a story such as a fairy tale like Little Red Riding Hood, and getting them to rewrite it as a comic, so then they're thinking about the audience that they're writing for, the language that they're going to use for that comic book. Or if it's, for example, in secondary school, thinking about rewriting it in another language, so they're practicing their use of vocabulary from another language. So from this simple app that you have, or apps, these 2 different apps, you can kind of extend the use of that app into a range of different subjects and skill sets. And just to give you an example of how it works, just focusing on Comic Life, you can also use it, for example, we've used it for newspaper reports. So there's a template already available and the students would just add their own text. They can upload their own images. Again, these can be images that they've drawn, or it could be images perhaps they've taken. So for example, if the children were dressing up as characters for the news story, you could take a photo and add that into the news report. It could be images from the internet as well. Okay, so it's quite easy to use. They can change fonts, which I know students absolutely love to kind of play around with different fonts, but it doesn't give them too much scope for kind of focusing on formatting, because obviously the focus is on getting the actual writing down on the screen. And just moving on a little bit, still thinking about writing, this is one of my favourite websites, and it's called the 100-Word Challenge. Now, the thing I love about this website is it's something that's open and accessible for students to have a real life audience for their writing. And the concept is that each week the website puts a new prompt on. So, for example, there's a prompt here, which is just an image. And the students have a challenge of trying to write something about that prompt in 100 words or less. So it could be an image that's placed as a prompt. Sometimes they put perhaps 5 random words that the children have to try and incorporate into those 100 words. Or they could do perhaps a phrase which is part of a sentence, either the beginning or middle of a sentence, that they need to add into their writing. And the thing I absolutely love, as I said, it gives them a real life audience because it is published on the internet, but also it gives them a chance to respond to any other child's post, so that they're learning how to use social media appropriately. So they're sending kind comments that other children can receive, and they're learning to receive comments from other people, perhaps if it's something which wasn't as kind, or perhaps it's given them some constructive feedback. It's helping them to learn how to cope with that constructive feedback. So to give you an example, you can see here these posts have been published from a school in New Zealand, but there's schools from all over the world which publish to this website. And this is an example of one that has been written from a student. It's not from our school, it's just something that I've picked from the website, and then an example of a comment from somebody else that has read that piece of text. Now, the great thing about this is it can be used from very young to kind of all the way up to secondary school, and it's actually quite challenging for some children for 2 different reasons. One is that it can either be that 100 words is quite a lot for a reluctant writer, or the alternative is that 100 words is actually not enough words, and the student has to learn to kind of be a bit more restrictive and select their vocabulary more carefully to stick to that 100-word challenge. Obviously, it's not the end of the world if they don't stick to it exactly, but it's the idea is to give them a challenge and learn how to be concise. So it really does get everybody involved. The way we've used it in our school, we don't actually use the website itself. We've used it internally in our own learning platform so that the comments and sharing is more private, so that we're keeping it within our own school community. So that is an option that you could have, but the concept is exactly the same. And I think it's been absolutely fantastic in the sense of social media, preparing students to use social media in a productive way, as I've mentioned about being kind, and also it gives them feedback which is not just from a teacher, but actually from their peers as well, which I think they appreciate more. So that's another example of a way to engage students with writing using technology. Okay, so moving on a little bit, thinking about cross-curriculum. Now, this is something that kind of teachers cover all the time. They're trying to engage students in their learning where they're focusing on the topic in a broader sense, so not just focusing, for example, on writing or just focusing on history, but thinking about how they can incorporate that across a range of different subjects. And we do sometimes get, and I'm sure you remember it from when you were children, oh, this is a really boring topic. Why do I need to learn this? I'm never going to use it in real life. So we need to find ways to help students understand that, this is something that you can incorporate into the real life, and it's something that you will probably use, or it is being used in real life, and perhaps they don't understand or see where it's coming from. So I've chosen the topic weather in particular. I actually live in Madrid, as I've said, and apart from the past week, we generally have pretty good weather in Madrid. So when we do cover the topic of weather, it's quite hard for us to teach the range of different weather conditions available, or that exist around the world. So what we've done in school is we've used things like the BBC weather website for students to research weather from around the world, and then learn a little bit about those cultures at the same time. So learning about, for example, the types of clothing they're wearing, using vocabulary to compare and contrast those different cultures, so they're developing their vocabulary skills as well. You can also link it to, for example, science, talking about shadows, measuring the shadows at different times of the day, and how different cultures, for example, used sundials in the past. So just within that one topic of weather, which can actually be quite challenging in Madrid and in Spain, you can extend it to cover a range of different subject areas. You can also link it to maths with graphs, but instead of just using, for example, pen and paper to draw those graphs, something, for example, in secondary school or maybe higher up in primary school, is to use Microsoft Excel, and students start to learn how to use Microsoft Excel, which can be quite challenging, but it's something that a lot of them will probably end up using in some sense later in life in their careers. For students who are younger, you may consider using something like Purple Mesh. It is a subscribed website, but it is quite useful. A lot more child friendly for younger students, and one that I use in the UK. I'm not sure if it's available in Spain, but it is quite useful as well. Similar to Purple Mesh, is just2easy.com. Okay, and in addition to that, again, thinking about the technology side of this, we've used green screening in school for the students after doing their research about the weather to create weather reports. So they've used a combination of the two apps, iMovie and Green Screen Doink, to create their weather video. So this is just an example here where the student has used London as their background to create their weather report. Okay, and if I just show you a little bit of what Green Screen Doink looks like, at the bottom you'll have a video of the student recording their, for example, weather reports. They need to have a green background for that, so that could just be some green paper, or we're quite fortunate in our school that we do have some walls that are green, so we tend to use that. And then just underneath you either have an image or a video or even a GIF that would be kind of the background layer for the student's weather report. Okay, and you just simply add these using the iPad app. You add the videos or photos, whatever it may be, as your background layer to the app for them to use. And then thinking about iMovie as well, okay, it's very similar formatting. You have the video and audio at the bottom, and at the top you can choose the audio or the media, the photos, videos that you want to add to create your video. Now, not only can you use the video that's been created in the green screen Doink app to be added to iMovie so that you can add it and elaborate, add music, perhaps add some photos or transitions so that it's kind of becoming more like a news report, not just the background of the news report, the weather reports, but you might have, for example, a news flash picture at the beginning. It can also be used to add audio recordings and images in between. Other ways you could use iMovie are, for example, thinking about now where perhaps parents aren't allowed in school as easily, is to be able to share the learning with parents online. So creating videos of the types of learning that have been taking place in school, so that you can share those online with parents. It could be that you just put a collection of pictures together of the pieces of work that students have been doing, or the students do this themselves. The students could then add some audio, so they could do a recording where they're talking about their learning. Or it could be, for example, in our school, we've used it for video tutorials about sports. So, for example, a group of students would create a video tutorial about how to do a piece of gymnastics or how to throw the javelin, and they would then create that video. We would share it, and so that other students could use it to learn. And also, you can, thinking about the 100-word challenge as well, if you put it in a learning platform where there's an opportunity for comments to be added, again, you're giving the students an opportunity to develop that understanding of social media and kind, appropriate comments. Okay. Another area in which we've used it, iMovie, is the advertising concept, thinking about persuasive language, persuasive vocabulary. So we've studied a range of different adverts online, discussed the different concepts, what makes a good advert, thinking about the videography, thinking about the camera, where you hold the camera, the angles that you're using, thinking about the music that they add, is it going to be quite lively, and then creating their own adverts using all of that content. So not only are they using their literacy skills, they're using kind of technology skills, think about music as well. You could even get to the point where if you have the time to study, to create a piece of music with the class that they could then use for their own video. Now, I've added this website here, Purple Planet, as well, just to mention it, as I'm sure lots of you are aware, obviously copyright is quite challenging nowadays. So this website is fantastic for educational use, as it gives you a selection of short pieces of audio, of music, for a range of different genres of music that students can use to add to their videos for educational purposes. Once it becomes something that's more promotional, then licenses need to be thought about, but for educational use, all of their music is actually free. And this is an example for those of you who use Microsoft in school. So, for example, you have Microsoft computers or laptops in school as opposed to iPads. There is a video editor, which is actually called Video Editor. This is what it looks like. Very similar layout, incredibly intuitive to use. It has a storyboard at the bottom where the video would be displayed and the audio would be displayed as well. You can add text. So, for example, we've used it to, again, share examples of children's learning with just photos. And then we would add just the child's name for each photo. You can change the motion, so kind of transitions from one video to the next. And you can add different filters as well. So there's a few, for example, 3D filters. If it's something for younger students, for example, there's little animations. If you were doing a video, for example, about the pirates, then there's a little treasure chest which you could add in there just to make it a bit more exciting, or things like a kind of a star appearing above your head, and you can choose whereabout these filters are added onto the video. And at the top, you would add some background music. They have a selection of free audio already in the software, but you can also add your own audio, for example, using the Purple Planet website. And then at the end, you just select Finish Video, and it will turn it into a video format for you to share with the parents or the students for them to use. Okay, so that's 2 different pieces of software depending on the type of computers or devices that you have available to you. Now, moving on, thinking about PowerPoint. Now, lots of you may be thinking, well, why am I talking about PowerPoint? This is something that we've been using for years and years and years. It's nothing new here. The reason I've mentioned this one is you may not have realised that over the years, PowerPoint, well, Microsoft in general, have been adding things to their software. And in PowerPoint, they've added something called a screen recording, which I have been using for the past 6 months, almost religiously, because it's been absolutely incredibly useful for creating video tutorials for students during the time when we were in quarantine. So I'm not going to say too much about how to use this, but instead just show you a video tutorial about how to create video tutorials.
This video will show you how to add audio to a PowerPoint, for example, to explain an activity as a video tutorial. There are 2 options available. I can add audio to a particular slide, or I can record a voiceover for the entire PowerPoint. To add audio to a particular slide, I go to Insert, Audio, and then Record Audio. Insert, Audio on the right-hand side, and Record Audio. I can give my audio a name or leave it like this, and then I press the Record button. This will record me speaking until I press OK. Once I have finished, it will automatically create an audio file on the page. This will record me speaking until I press OK. If I want to, I can move it to a different part of the page to link to the text. The other option is to add a voiceover for the entire PowerPoint. To do this, I go to Slideshow and then Record Slideshow. So Slideshow at the top, I choose Record Slideshow, and I'm going to just record from the beginning of my slideshow. I press Start Recording, and then I start speaking. As I turn the page, a new audio file will be created for each page. When I have finished, I can press the pause button or any button on your keyboard, and this will automatically stop the recording. You can see that I now have an audio file connected to each page of my PowerPoint. I can press play to listen to it, and if I decide that I don't like one of those audio files, I can press the delete button or suprimir on most Spanish keyboards to delete that audio file. If I decide to delete all of the audio files from that slideshow recording, I go to Record Slideshow, Clear, and Clear Narration on all slides. Once I have uploaded my PowerPoint to the File section of Class Notebook, students must select the Slideshow option to be able to listen to the audio. They select Slideshow from beginning, and then they will see a play button to be able to listen to the audio on that page. If they select anywhere else on the page, it will turn the page and other audio files can be listened to.
Okay, so this is a video tutorial that I actually created for teachers, where I used the insert and screen recording, and I simply just selected the whole screen and pressed record, and I could talk over it. But it's something that can be used by the students themselves as well. So the idea could be that the students create their own PowerPoint, but they're explaining a type of concept, be it a math concept, science, or even a language concept, that they then share, for example, with younger students. And they would create that PowerPoint and perhaps you have an online learning platform that you could share with those students for them to see. Again, it could be the teachers that are doing it, so they can create a PowerPoint. Perhaps if you have a flipped learning situation where you create the PowerPoint in advance, you could add some audio to go alongside anything in the PowerPoint. That's particularly useful, for example, if you have perhaps some dyslexic students in your class, or you have some students who are perhaps new to the language, or younger students perhaps haven't learned how to read yet. Having that extra audio there is really useful. Okay, so you could add those audio files in either for the whole PowerPoint or just on certain pages, certain sections, and then present it on your learning platform for the students to see either before or after your lesson. So that's one of the things I love about PowerPoint, which perhaps we didn't use so much in the past. There are some other things on PowerPoint as well, something called forms. You may have access to that if you have Office 365. I will talk about that a little bit more in a moment. Okay, and you can add videos as well, as you can see I've done here, be it your own videos or videos from the internet. Okay. And this is an app for those of you who have iPads in your school. Explain Everything is an app which is, it can be used in a similar way. It's basically a whiteboard app, and it has a range of different tools, standard tools like writing, normal text, drawing. You can add media, so be it images or videos that can be added to the page. And then to go along with that, you can record yourself talking over it. So just to give you an example, if you had a maths concept that you wanted to explain to the students, you could talk through the concept. And again, thinking, for example, about flipped learning, talk through the concept and write as you go along. I'll show you an example in a moment, so that students can see it or refer back to it at home, for example, to help them complete their homework. But not only can it be the teacher using this, it can be the students. So I've seen it used, it wasn't actually in our school, it was in another school, where all the students created maths videos to explain their understanding of a concept. And this was demonstrating that not only were they able to use that concept to complete questions, but they could then explain it to somebody else. So they had to create their own video. They had a checklist of criteria to make sure that they included all of those criteria in their video, and then their partner would have to check to see if they had met the checklist of criteria. So it's a really useful tool to use for both the staff and the students. And just very quickly to show you a basic example of how that would work and what it would look like as a video.
This video will explain how to use column addition to add tens and units. For example, if I had 14 plus 24, I put the tens on the left-hand side and the units on the right-hand side, and then work out the calculation.
Okay, so that's just a very basic video, but you can see the concept behind it is that the students would see the text as you begin writing. Okay, so moving on, this is something slightly different. This is a really useful tool for science if you're studying the body. What it is a t-shirt that you can buy. The t-shirt costs about 30 euros. And then it's linked to a free app called Curiscope, and it's using augmented reality for the students to be able to see what the inside of the body looks like. Now, I absolutely love this tool because it allows students to get a real life understanding of what the body looks like inside and how it works and what's going on inside their bodies. So just to show you an example.
Hello, my name is Hans. I'm your virtual expert on physiology and anatomy. Let's explore and learn about your body. Let's take a look inside your heart.
Okay, so augmented reality, the idea of being able to see something on a screen, but perhaps in kind of like a 3D image of it. Now, Curiscope started with just this T-shirt. They've actually moved on to this one here, which is some posters with augmented reality of different planets and what the planets look like inside. And there are lots of other apps out there for augmented reality. There's different types of, for example, cards where you could scan an image, for example, of a dinosaur for younger students and then have an augmented version of the dinosaur as well. So that's definitely something to help if there are any science teachers out there. Okay, moving on to coding. Now, for some people, if you hear the word coding, you might start to panic and think, oh, I can't teach that. I don't know anything about coding. That's going to be too complicated. Now, the great thing is about coding nowadays is that it has been simplified so that students and teachers don't have to have all of the background knowledge of the kind of real coding behind the scenes. And it's lots of pieces of software like Scratch, which lots of you may have heard of before, use something called block coding, which is just lots of different coloured codes, colour coordinated, and it's very basic, just language, English language, saying, for example, move forward 10 steps. So Scratch is something that's been around for quite a few years. Lots of you may have heard of it, as I said. It's from MIT, and this is a free website which anybody can sign up to. They do have a downloadable version of the software, so if you're not allowed to, for example, add students to the website, then you can have the downloaded version on computers so that students can use it in a kind of safer environment. And I'll show you in a moment an example of how we've used that in school. And the other website I wanted to mention to you was Microsoft MakeCode, who again, they use lots of block coding and they have lots of video tutorials. Now, with both of these, there are other coding websites out there. These are the ones that we use in our school. The types of things that you could be doing are thinking about, for example, creating an animation. So again, thinking back to what we were talking about, storyboarding or advertising, just having an animation so that students are telling a story, perhaps retelling the story of Little Red Riding Hood. It could be that they're creating a game. So, for example, thinking about online safety. The thing I focus on a lot in our school with online safety is trying to incorporate it into the other areas of IT that we teach, rather than teaching it as a standalone topic. So within the idea of creating a game, the children are creating an online safety game with questions that lead them to different points or in a different route, kind of like an escape room, really. We've created maths games, which I'll show you in a moment, or it could be a vocabulary game, be it a spelling game, or, for example, vocabulary related to a particular topic that you're studying. So to give you an idea of Scratch, this is a game that a Year 5 pupil has made, which they would be about 9 or 10 years old. So they've designed everything on the screen themselves. So they're also developing their mouse control, which is obviously really important for use of technology, use of computers as they get older. And then they obviously need to know their timetables to make sure that they have coded or programmed the correct answers into the computer. So just to show you what their game looks like, very simple. Okay, and then just moving on to look at MakeCode. The advantage of MakeCode, whilst Scratch does have some video tutorials, I think MakeCode probably has a few more as it's more recent. And the examples they have, so for example, these are MakeCode tutorials for the arcade games, and this one, Chase the Pizza, could be used in a different way. So the idea is that the character moves around the screen and has to eat all the pizzas to collect points. So you could use this in an educational way, for example, with maths, to do the times tables, so collecting multiples of 2, for example, or collecting prime numbers. You could use it for vocabulary, for example, collecting the vocabulary related to the heart. Lots of different ways you could use some of these games here. And then these are tutorials for something called the microbit. So the microbit is a small kind of mini computer that can be bought for students. Again, they're about €15, and it has lots of different tutorials available on the website to help students learn how to code. These ones are incredibly easy, maybe 3 or 4 steps to create a code and then get a flashing heart on the screen. So the microbit has 25 small lights on it that can be programmed to light up as need be. So the ways we've used it in our school, for example, are for students to design a new product, a new game, or a new product to sell. So we've had, for example, students who've designed a lockable diary, new board games, so they've used the microbit as a dice. We've had students who have created a weather station, so kind of measuring the different types of weather using the microbit and following the different types of coding here. So it's been kind of incorporated into lots of different subjects whilst using the technology. And the students almost forget the fact that they're learning because they're actually enjoying it so much. Okay, moving on to quizzes and assessment for learning. This is probably a concept which you've heard of lots. Assessment for learning, making sure that we're informing ourselves of the students' understanding of what they've learned, what you've taught them, and if they've been able to understand, if they've actually learned that concept. So these are just a selection of different quiz softwares available to you. So Plickers, this is one I really enjoy using. In the past, we probably quite often use things like thumbs up, thumbs down, hands on your head, you know, hands in the air if you understand this. Whereas with Plickers, again, the idea is it's trying to engage the students, and the teachers get some data at the end of it that they can keep a record of to see the student understanding for the whole class. And what happens is that each student has a QR code like this, similar to this, on a piece of paper. You can see in this image. I'll show you a video in a moment. It has 4 different answers available, so you could have multiple choice up to D, A, B, C, D. And the student chooses the answer that they think is correct and just rotates their card depending on the answer that they have chosen. So just to show you what that looks like, just fast forward a little bit.
Number 3, Plickers comes with an app, and you don't have to put the questions in on the app. You can just do it on the computer, but then you can queue them up for your actual class. I like to start with a simple, fun question that students can answer. It says, what do you normally eat for breakfast? When I click on that, it will actually project the question up on the board. And so I can read it, and I can tell the students, all right, go ahead and pick the one that you want. I tell the students to hold it up based on the answer that they have, and then when I'm ready to scan, I'll just come back to the app, I'll click the little camera button, and it can actually read all of their answers, even pretty far away. And seeing if it's right or wrong, this question doesn't have a right or wrong answer. Of course, souls is probably the correct answer for what you eat for breakfast. But since there's no right or wrong answer, it doesn't show up as green or red. If I click on stop, now I can actually see the data of who answered what. We've got a lot of soul eaters. And what's really cool is if I hit show graph, it'll actually show how many people answered each one of these questions, and everyone can actually see that. And then a lot of times I'll be like, okay, so we've got some people answered A, some people answered D. Who answered D? All right.
Okay, so you can see the idea behind that is that as a teacher, you're able to gather an understanding of how the whole class is doing, but you also are able to walk away with that data at the end, as opposed to, for example, thumbs up, thumbs down, where it's just a quick glance and then you have to try and remember that, or obviously address that misconception straight away. This way you can kind of go back to that information and come back to a misconception on another day if need be. I'm sure lots of you have heard of Kahoot. Quizlet as well. The one thing I like about Quizlet is that you can create a set of, for example, kind of study cards with key information on. So for example, if you're learning a language, you can have the word with the translation, and then Quizlet will automatically create little quizzes for you using those kind of study cards. So I really enjoy that one. Microsoft Forms and Google Forms are very similar. I'm going to show you a little bit about Microsoft Forms purely because that's the one we use in our school, but Google Forms works just as well if that's what you have access to in your school. Okay, so Microsoft Forms, just to show you a little bit about it.
All apps to choose from.
Okay.
And then add a new question. Now there are a range of question formats to choose from. One of them, for example, is multiple choice, which allows you to self-mark the quiz using the Forms app. Add more options and then choose which is the correct answer so that the quiz will mark itself. To choose a correct answer, I give a tick. I can give points for the correct answer. I can use this button to say that all students must answer this question. It's a required question. Or if I want to use the multiple answers option, so for example, there are multiple answers available. I can choose the multiple answers box. I can add a picture to my question to link to the question by choosing the button, then image. I can either upload an image from my computer or find one from the internet. And then I can change the order of my questions by using these arrows to move up or down, and you can see that the number of the question has changed as I do that. Another question format is the text question, which allows students to write open text, which may be slightly harder for self-marking. If there is an exact correct answer, then you can add the answer here. If it's a longer answer, for example, an essay type question or more marks for the question, then you can choose this option here as well. Again, you can change the number of points available for the question.
Okay, so you get the idea. Really useful tool. The thing I love about Microsoft Forms is that, as kind of mentioned there, it's got some options for self-marking, so you can get some feedback. Again, it's collating the answers for the whole class so you can identify misconceptions, but you can also add, for example, responses if the child has put an incorrect answer, and options for kind of follow-up. Oh, you haven't got the answer correct, so please have a look at this video, for example, to see if you can try that answer again. Okay, and moving on very quickly to Office 365. These are some examples of the types of apps which I think are incredibly useful for online learning. Stream, Forms I've mentioned. Stream is a safer environment. Instead of using YouTube to share videos with students, you could use Stream within the Office 365 package. If you have Google Classroom, I'm sure they have a similar concept there as well. Sway is something which is very similar to PowerPoint for students, but it's much simpler. So rather than students spending a lot of time dedicated to changing what font they use, what color of text they use, what the background looks like, they will focus more on the content of their presentation instead. So they're actually spending time on what you need them to spend the time on. And Teams, which lots of you will be familiar with as a tool to be used to share their learning. Okay, this is just an example of Stream. where you could put a selection of different videos available. These are video tutorials which we kind of shared with students during the kind of online learning for them to learn how to use the tools, but it could be used, for example, for flipped learning so that they watch the video before they come to the class. And just a couple more things to show you before we finish off. Classroom screen. This was just something I wanted to mention, which I think is incredibly useful, particularly if you are teaching online at the moment. It's basically like an interactive whiteboard, but it's from your computer. So it has a range of different tools available to you, including, for example, a QR code. So just to show you what that looks like, you type in the website address and it will automatically create a QR code that students can scan to take them to that website. Particularly useful for younger students who perhaps don't have that typing ability just yet. There's traffic lights, there's kind of sound level controls for lots of different behaviour management techniques, strategies, countdowns, spaces where you can add text, and as soon as you finish with one of those tools, you close them. Okay, and just to finish off, obviously I've talked a lot about tools, technology tools that you can use online, thinking also about kind of talking about technology perhaps in an offline context is the concept of debating. So perhaps thinking about some of these topics, for example, which would perhaps engage your students, things about should there be age restrictions for social media, talking about the news that we've had about TikTok recently, in the US in particular. Should Minecraft be used in schools for education? Should homework be delivered online? These are some examples of the types of topics you could discuss with your students, which would engage them because it's the type of technology that they're used to using. What I would suggest with this is that perhaps you source some news articles that you could research together as a class, and then children are extracting facts from that to help them create and generate their debate. Okay, and I will finish there and hand over for questions.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Vasanti. I've been making a list of all the things that you've been talking about. Absolutely fantastic. I just want to remind all of the participants that, of course, we've got your presentation. Thank you very much on the Padlet. I'll put it up this afternoon. And also they can come back and watch a recording so they can watch it again, because if they're anything like me, help when the teacher says I can't do that. I'm going to have another go. Very good. A couple of questions, they were technical questions more than anything. Fatima was talking about 100wc.net, or however you read it. Is it a free tool?
Yes, it is. It's absolutely free. Teachers can decide how they add their post to the website. It could be using their own school website that they add a link to it, or it could be using the website itself, but it's completely free.
Brilliant. Okay. Kate asks, is there an Android or Windows version for iMovie?
Oh, the Windows version would be Video Editor. I'm not sure about Android. But perhaps I'll have a look and see if I can kind of get something added to the Padlet for you.
Thank you. Somebody said, Anon suggested Windows Movie Maker. Does that work in more or less the same way?
Yes, Windows Movie Maker. On slightly older versions of Windows, it's called Movie Maker. They've now changed it to Video Editor, but it's more or less the same thing.
Okay. And Fatima also asked, talking about Explain Everything, is it possible to use this app on a computer?
I don't think it is, but I'm not 100% certain on that one.
So we can go away and find out. I want to buy one of those T-shirts. I love it. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's great.
Do you actually have them in the school? Have you used them?
We do have them in the school, yes. We started using them last year and the kids absolutely loved it.
I can imagine. Brilliant. Okay, I had a question. Social distancing. Okay, I'm based in Bilbao and we've got our classes starting next week. And of course, all the iPads and computers that we used to use in our classrooms, we can't use them because the kids can't share them. What can you give us just a couple of the resources that you've talked about this afternoon that we can use in a social distancing classroom?
in a social distancing classroom. Do you mean in terms of kind of what would the context be? Would it be that there are some devices available but just limited, or there's no device available at all?
Well, the teacher has a device.
I would suggest
they're not at home anymore.
Okay, so in those circumstances, I probably would suggest you can use things like Explain Everything, but it would probably be more as a kind of whole class circumstance. So you would perhaps have the child come up and explain it, to explain the concept, but you'd be recording it at the same time, so that you can then share it. If you have kind of like an online learning platform, you can share it with the class later as a kind of resource for them to come back to. Or it could be that perhaps a small group of children have recorded with the teacher at one point during the day, and then you share it with the rest of the class at a later point in the day, and the rest of the class perhaps are kind of evaluating that explanation. Just thinking about some of the other ones. What else have I mentioned? Video editor, I would say, or iMovie. I would suggest that would be probably more for the teacher sharing students' work. Particularly, for example, as you can't have parents on site, I think that's a good way to be able to share what the students have been doing with the parents through using something, just kind of taking lots of photos and kind of just putting them together in Video Editor or iMovie to create a short video to share with those parents.
That's nice. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Vasanti. You've brought us to the end of a very good day. I hope you've had a chance to see some of the talks, but I've really enjoyed your session, and I think from the comments in the Q&A that all of the attendees have as well. I've just got a couple of housekeeping things to say. Thank you very much to Vasanti Ramdeen for giving us a final session, to everybody who's joined us today. Apparently from 33 countries. This was for British Council Spain, but we've opened it to everybody, and we're very happy to have people from all over following us today. Just to remind people that they will be receiving an email so that they can give us some feedback, because all of our speakers and all of the people who are behind the scenes, we're interested in getting feedback so that we can make this even better next time. There is an opportunity for you to share some teaching tips. Quite a lot of people have already done it in our Padlet, in our virtual hall. You can still visit the publishers' stands, and we're also putting up, little by little, we're putting up the presentations of all of the speakers. So thank you to the speakers. And if anybody wants to have a look at that, then that'll be up there for a week or so. And to remind everybody about the 80-word competition, Vasanti was mentioning the 100-word challenge. Well, this is fewer words, talking about your inspirational colleague. So send us your email with that story. And to remind everybody as well about the bilingual conference that's coming up next month on the 20th of October, and there's information about that also in the Padlet. And just finally, good luck for the rest of the year. It's going to be strange, but this is a great way of starting off. So thank you, Vasanti, and thank you everybody for coming.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.